All right, we're back. Peace, everybody. It's your brother Bleak, and welcome to another installment of Scarecrow's Chamber. Today, I would like to talk about, I guess you could say, a way of life that I constantly refer to. And if you follow me on any platform, I kind of make references to this particular word, but it's something that I've always found really fascinating, especially when you go behind the history of this word. And today I would like to talk about, the history of the Shaolin. And obviously, here in the Western world, when you hear the word Shaolin, you think of, the Buddhist monks and, the ancient temples in China, mainland China. But I just want to, give a little bit of history lesson. I'm not going to go too deep, might be going all over the place, but I have like a bit of a history written right here in front of you, and I'm going to read a little bit of it. And in throughout the history of the Shaolin temples, you have somebody who was called an abbot. Now, the abbot is basically the patriarch. He's the highest ranking monk in the temple. And when you look at the history of martial arts as a whole, at least in Asia, and I'm pretty sure if you go even further before that, they probably had a lot of ways of combat. Because, like I said, wrestling is probably the oldest form of combat, but that goes all the way back, to ancient Egypt, ancient, Greece and stuff like that. But as far as Asia is concerned, martial arts, started in India, like 5,000 years ago. Chinese history goes back 5,000 years. So there was a lot of, you know, Buddhists, monks and priests who pretty much trekked from India to China because, the Shaolin Temple was built by the Northern Wei, the Northern Zhou dynasties, and this goes back to AD 645 on the north side of Shaoxi, which is the central peak of Mount Song. And let me just read a little bit of this. Sir. It says, as the first Shaolin abbot, Batoi, who was the first abbot, devoted himself to translating Buddhist scriptures and preaching doctrines to hundreds of his followers. According to the legend, the Bodhidharma, which is the 28th patriarch of the Mahayana Buddhism in India, arrived at the Shaolin Temple in 527. He spent 9 years meditating in the cave of the Wuru Peak and initiated the Chinese Chan tradition at the Shaolin Temple. Thereafter, Bodhidharma was honored as the first patriarch of Chan Buddhism. The temple, historically agricultural complex, standing out its great aesthetic value and its profound cultural connotations, have been inscribed in the World Heritage List. And the main pillars of Shaolin culture as Chan Buddhism, martial arts, Buddhist art, and traditional Chinese medicine. This cultural heritage still constituting the daily temple life. It's representative of Chinese civilization. At present, Shaolin Temple is a global low carbon ecological scientific spot of the national 5A level. See, nowadays it's more like a tourist attraction, and so when you go to mainland China, the Buddhist temples, you really don't know who's really legit anymore because unfortunately the that dreaded Chinese Communist Party, better known as also known as the CCP, they restricted a lot of religious expressions and independence that changed kind of the ancient system because during Chairman Mao Zedong's time, there was between 1966 to 1976 until Mao's death, he held what was called the Cultural Revolution, and he pretty much said, let's attack the four olds, old ideas, old culture, old customs, old pursuits and stuff like that. So basically he had what was called the Red Guard, which is pretty much just a bunch of teenagers, really. Pretty much just go around mainland China, just smashing old temples, destroying, old Chinese manuscripts, and, pretty much just going after anything that had to do with Chinese history and culture. And so that's probably the biggest tragedy of all. that the communists pretty much destroy their own culture, their own history. And a lot of the stuff of the Shaolin really fell into that. But a lot of it, is still, preserved. If you go outside of mainland China, for example, you go to Taiwan, a lot of it was, preserved in Hong Kong, even though, the CCP have, dug their claws into it as well. But you have a lot of monks who defected from mainland China here to here in the United States. In fact, there's actually a guy named Sifu Shongying Ming, who is a practitioner here in Manhattan, actually. But to dig into just Shaolin culture now, where the martial arts really comes into play. Well, first of all, the myths of the Shaolin. Asian monks are typically portrayed in Western culture as being knowledgeable, at peace, spiritual individuals. They're often depicted as wise mystics who can offer spiritual advice and stuff like that. So, especially when you see them in films and television and stuff like that. As a matter of fact, there's a show back in the '60s starring David Carradine. I think I've talked about this in my Bruce Lee episode called Kung Fu, where you see a bit of that. You see a little bit of Shaolin influence and stuff like that. But what fascinated, me the most when it came to the Shaolin is, the martial arts and stuff like that, and a lot of what went into it in terms of because when I think of Shaolin, I think of people who are just at their peak in terms of mental stability, physical stability, just diet, just their way of life. I honestly believe that the Shaolin are probably some of the most disciplined human beings on the planet. So it was something that I've always revered. But when I was watching, Bruce Lee films back in the day, and pretty much the kung fu uh, cinema boom back in the '70s that still goes on today, I was just so intrigued where that stuff actually came from. And like I said, it's 5,000 years worth of history that really goes into it. And I wanted to talk about as far as the acknowledgments in terms of the heritage. Excuse me, I'm rambling as always, but I got like a little bit of history written in front of me, and I just wanted to go over. And there's a manual that was used throughout the years of the Shaolin Temple. I believe it's called the Yin Jing or something like that. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I know I'm probably butchering a lot, but that was a manual that pretty much went through all of the principles in terms of the principles of muscle tendon change. It consists of a series of exercises, coordinated breathing techniques, of enhanced physical health, and just precise consistency and dexterity and stuff like that. It pretty much is the mastering the body, the kinetic chain. And in Chinese, the word yi means change. Jin means tendons and sinews, while Jing means methods. So it's pretty much just exercises in different forms to strengthen, muscles and tendons, and flexibility, and speed and stamina, balance, and just all around coordination of the body. And of course, when you see, clips of, the crazy exercises that the Shaolin monks do, this was something that was, practiced throughout history, and it's kind of more of a like I said, it's a tourist attraction now, so it's kind of taken for granted by the CCP, at least in my opinion, from what I see. But it has a large following throughout the world. A lot of celebrities and public figures, and a lot of monks from all over. They go and pay their respects because it's such I guess you could say just a sacred site on Mount Song. So a lot of people pay. Like me personally, I've always been a huge admirer of Chinese culture. I mean, Oriental culture in general, but it really hit home. You know, from a martial arts perspective. Just watching all those films back in the day, and I guess you could say, watching those films, just seeing all the different animal forms and how all of the monks were able to come up with that stuff. Now, a lot of people can, you have a lot of practitioners throughout the world say, "Is that stuff really effective? Does it really work?" That was the biggest gripe with me when it comes to practitioners in general. They always say, they always try to pin, two different disciplines and you know put them together and say, oh, which one is better. I think as a practitioner, I don't think you should ever see it that way. I mean, me personally, I think there is something to be learned no matter what you study. Doesn't matter if it's kung fu or karate or ninjutsu or jujitsu or kempo or kaji kempo, capoeira, eskrima, and salvat, aikido. It doesn't matter. I mean, to me, like, there's something that is useful in everything. Is 100% of it going to be useful? Probably not. But from a realistic standpoint, if someone is attacking you on the street, I mean, a real confrontation lasts maybe 3 to 4 seconds, especially when someone who is trained or who really knows what they're doing. I mean, real confrontations don't last that long like you see in the movie. In the movies, they're really drawn out because, like I said, it's a spectacle in cinema, so it has to look good and stuff like that, which I completely understand. But in reality, my grandmaster used to talk to me about this a lot. A couple of seconds and you're pretty much done. But what I like to take a piece from all disciplines, and like Bruce Lee said, you absorb what is useful and you discard what doesn't. But what I loved about the Shaolin is the animal forms and stuff like that. I mean, just the concept of that you can take the form of an animal, and when you look at the techniques, a lot of it is deadly. Honestly, it really is deadly because it's not a sport. You see what I'm saying? So it's a practical, examination of what to use, how to use it, and stuff like that. For example, all of the animal forms, the snake, the crane, the mantis, the panther, the ox, the rooster, the dragon, tiger, tiger. That's was my particular favorite, and because when I was studying, so I would kind of like mess around and do a lot of those things and stuff like that. But it's something that can be learned from all of it. And of course, since the Shaolin, it's more of it's a Chinese influence, so it's what we call the the soft technique, which means to like redirect force and all that stuff, as opposed to the hard technique is pretty much using force to meet force. And the concept in terms of techniques and stuff like that, a lot of it is because the main focus is to strengthen the body, right? To strengthen the body, the mind, the spirit, and all the other stuff. But I just love the presentation of it when I used to watch it in the films and stuff like that. It really didn't bother me or what worked or what doesn't work because to me it's all about the individual. Bruce Lee said it best. The individual is more important than any style or system. It's the individual that counts. It doesn't matter if one guy is a boxer, the other guy's like Subak or something like that. One's punching and one's kicking. It really doesn't, and that's what people do. Like whoever wins, okay, that style's better. It's not really about the styles. It's not really about the system. It's about the individual who's using it. And the Shaolin, that's one thing that I have on my mind all the time, because obviously not just from a martial arts standpoint, but from a discipline standpoint and all that stuff. So I just find it so fascinating. I've always have. And when you have 5,000 years worth that came from, probably I could say started in India, and there's a Indian art of war, and it has a and name I forget the name of it. I think it's Kali something. And I've actually seen footage of some footage of how these techniques were dished out, as how these I mean, just the stances they took and stuff, like, because like I said, this is ancient times. So I mean, you're talking swords and shields and spears and all the other stuff. I mean, it was a art of war. So a lot of that stuff, when you go back to the days of the Three Kingdoms, what the for all the gamers out there, what the Dynasty Warrior games are built on is actually based on the Three Kingdoms, and these were real people. People like Cao Cao and Guan Yu, Zhuge Liang, all those people. Those were real people, and of course, throughout the Dynasty days, a lot of them were using those Shaolin techniques. That was a combination, because the Shaolin, they also practice with weaponry and stuff like that. And I believe that the original Shaolin temple, I don't think it's the same temple that still stands today. I believe that the original one burned down or something like that, because in the early days, the Shaolin weren't always at peace. And that's the thing about mainland China. People have to understand, mainland China is basically just built on civil war. If you look at old maps of China compared to what it is today, the country was much smaller. And then you had China in the middle, and then you have what was Tibet and Cantonia and Mongolia and stuff like that. And then through civil war, the country just expanded, because all of those warlords were fighting for land, essentially, and the country just expanded and expanded and expanded, and that's what it basically is today. So China is never really been, I guess you could say, a unified country. It was just a bunch of warlords throughout sanctified emperorships, and they were just fighting and fighting and fighting and fighting for territories, and then the country just expands. I mean, that's what China always was. You know, it was always governed from the top down through sanctified emperors. And it's crazy. That's what when the communists came to power. It's funny, Mao Zedong, his generation was the last generation that studied the old imperial exam system, which was myth, folklore, and poetry composition, or something like that. And when he came to power, he pretty much just ruled like an emperor himself. And throughout those 5,000 years worth of all that fighting, of course the Shaolin was mixed up in all of that stuff. So it's just crazy, to think of it, how something that was started out as a practice, I mean, which it still is today, but like I said, with the CCP, who the hell really knows nowadays? But the practice of it, the concept in terms of mind, body, spirit, and all that stuff. And I'm not what you would call a spiritual guy, but it's still fascinating just to learn about that stuff, and how deep it really goes, and how it really does help a lot of people. It doesn't have to be for martial arts. I honestly, it's more mental than physical anyway. I mean, that was the intent of the Shaolin. It was more mental. I mean, someone once said that the most powerful muscle in your body is actually the one between your ears. And it does, and as you learn new things, and as you overcome fears and stuff like that, it does take different forms. And your brain, I'm referring to, your brain is a muscle that does take on different forms and different cracks and stuff like that as you learn something new. As a matter of fact, what they call I believe they call it a conditioning therapy or something like that, where, say, like, for example, say like if you were afraid of, I don't know, like a spider or something like that, and somebody will take a spider and like put it in front of you and stuff like that, that tends to work, because when you are confronted with something and your brain starts to readjust and stuff like that, and then you kind of overcome that fear and stuff like that. So it just, like I said, I'm just rambling, but it just, certain concepts like that is something that's very fascinating, just exercising the brain. And through all of the ancient scriptures, through Buddhism and Taoism and Confucius, it's just so unfortunate. That's what's becoming of mainland China today ever since the communists took over. It's very, very, sad. You know, but like I said, all of the history is not lost. I mean, honestly, here in the United States, you can study and learn a lot about the Shaolin and all of those ancient scriptures and stuff like that. I mean, just the history of it. The history of it is still preserved. All around the world. There's a lot of monks abroad who still preserve that history and stuff like that. And I mean, just like when you go to the continent of Africa, there's a lot of tribes who still preserve that history. And the Shaolin, man, is just, and that's the crazy thing about it. You have the monks who are, the spiritual guides, and then you have the Shaolin monks. That's the difference. You have monks and Shaolin monks. The Shaolin monks were more like the martial artists. They were the combatants. Because, like I said, you had to protect the temples and stuff like that from invaders. Because remember what I said, China was built pretty much built in civil war. So you constantly had different invaders invading these temples and stuff like that. So you had the monks led by the abbot, who were like the spiritual leaders who were trying to preserve the peace. And if things got into it, and if there was no way to avoid conflict, then that's when you had the Shaolin monks who would fight to protect the temple, and to protect the history and the culture and all that stuff. It was just crazy. It's crazy when you really dive into all this stuff, man, and learn about it. Like I said, I mean, it's something that I've always been fascinated with, something that I've, still kind of look into more. I'm, expanding out and learned about other stuff. But the Shaolin, it never left me. Ever since I got a glimpse of it, of what it looked like in those old, kung fu cinema flicks, stuff like that. That's kind of what inspired me to look at it and really dive deep into what goes into it. So yeah, man, like I always say, for the Shaolin. And I'm actually gonna end this one earlier, like I do. But yeah, man, for the Shaolin, man. And this I'm gonna sign off, and until we meet again, people. As always, my name's Bleak Nelson. See you later. Take care.